And I'm back. Cool. So the purchase process. So from start to finish, the tightest time frame you can buy management rights in really is about 60 days. We sort of say to clients, you want to allow 65 in a perfect sense, because really what happens in the process itself is again, you find the one you want to buy, you go backwards and forwards on an offer and acceptance form. That's a one-pager that's not worth the paper it's written on legally. That's just more an indication of intent from both vendor and purchaser that they're interested in selling and buying from the other. When you get to the stage of doing actual contracts, you will know what you are signing is something important, because whole forests die as part of the process. But once the contract's signed, normally works this way is that figures are verified in that first 14 days. So what will happen, contracts signed, we look at those before you sign them. Brokers send them through to us, and then we send copies out to everyone to say, here's your contract, this is what you've got to do and when you've got to do it by. So for example, if you'd engage Sam, the moment it hits our desk, we'll write to Sam, we'll tell him what he's got to verify, we'll tell him the time frame he's got to do it, and he'll then produce a report back to you and us that says, yes, it stacks up, or no, it doesn't. And from our end, if we're going to see a contract die, that's what it will be on. Sometimes vendors do their own figures. I'm assuming Sam spoke about that. The accountants like tearing those apart for sport. Sometimes, particularly in the shorter term complexes, if you've got figures that are so if you went to buy a shorter term complex today, you'd normally want figures, say, through to the end of January. If the figures were through the end of September, it's quite possible that there's been some variances in October, November, December that might blow that annual figure out. So from our end, what I prefer to say to clients is do your figures first, and we won't start the legals until we know figures are okay, because that, it's a staged process. So, and if there's anything in that verification report you don't like, you can terminate the contract, get your deposit back, walk away. Although normally what happens is if it has come in light, there's a discussion normally had between accountants or certainly by the broker, and the price is renegotiated. And if that's not to your satisfaction, you don't have to proceed. Next step is the legal due diligence. As I mentioned before, that's where these businesses, this goodwill, this multiplier you're paying, is based on your ability to earn that income for the remaining term of the agreements. What the legal due diligence confirms is that those agreements are valid. So there's some simple stuff like you can't enter into a management rights agreement other than through a secret ballot. So what happens from a body corporate process is that most motions that go to general meeting are on an open ballot. So people send back their voting papers and you can see well in advance where the voting is. In a management rights sense, it's a secret ballot, and what has to happen is the body corporate needs to engage a returning officer, which is sort of someone completely independent of the body corporate, and the votes on that motion need to go back to that returning officer. So that only came in in 2003, which is 12 years ago. But before that, they were all open ballots. So what you're able to do would be to ring the body corporate manager, assuming you got on well with them, to say, how are we tracking, who's voted yes, who's voted no, do I need to go rustle some people up, and you could actually manage the process a little bit better. Now it's sort of like a lottery in a sense of you go to the general meeting, the returning officer will be over here in the corner with all of the ballot papers, and they won't start opening them and counting them until such time as the meeting actually starts. So one of the key legal things is that a secret ballot is used. Believe it or not, even though that's been in place 12 years, we still get the odd one where a very unprofessional strata manager sends it out by open ballot. So from the get-go, that agreement's invalid. So from a legal due diligence perspective, that's one of the many things we look at from our end: office hours, termination and assignment rights, the personality of the body corporate, talk about owners in general meeting and also committee level, whether there's anything in the minutes that should or could alarm you, disputes, issues with particular owners, and probably the one caveat I'll use is that every single building has a difficult person, without doubt. That's just life. So whether that person's on the committee, the chairperson, the body corporate manager, just a stray owner that likes throwing bombs to general meetings, part of that's what we go through those minutes for to check, and so on and so forth. So what we do at the end of that is give you a complete written report that says, here's what you're buying, here's all the stuff you need to know, here's the things we think need your further consideration. So for example, there's the legal side of things. Obviously, if there's a secret ballot that hasn't been used, there's not really a whole lot of grey about that. It's fatal. if there's a really difficult person that causes the manager enormous grief, it would be pointing that out and say, well, the owner of Unit 32, for whatever reason, seems to be particularly upset with management. Be aware of that, what do you want to do about it, and run through the issues. So while we'll summarise for you all the legal things, we sort of break it down into these are the important things we think you need to be aware of. Assuming that hurdle's crossed, and again, if you don't like any part of that, you terminate the contract, get your deposit back, walk away. Last is then finance. So finance is sort of running parallel with legal due diligence in essence, where the bank's using the verification report that you've obtained to make sure that you've got the ability to service the loan and fund it and secure it. Damien's no doubt spoken to you about that. What I like to see is a letter of offer from a bank to say, we are going to lend you X dollars at X rates on X conditions with these certifications required or whatever it might be beforehand. So for me, a letter of offer from a bank, congratulations, you've got finance, is not something you would ordinarily sign, confirm you're committed to the contract on. You want to see the terms and conditions. So sometimes, subject to how much you're borrowing, which bank you're using, they might need valuations. Sometimes they will accept a certification from us around the legalities of the management rights agreement. Sometimes, again, depending on how much you're borrowing, they might get their own lawyers to look at it from a bank's perspective, which is slightly different from the perspective that we look at it. So either way, you just want to make sure that you've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, and that you know that when you add your money that you're contributing with what the bank's got, you're going to be able to settle on the day. So other things there that you can build in might be sale of a house. Really hasn't happened in recent times. Interestingly, got a couple of these at the moment about pets. Managers particularly attached to their animals. The contract subject to the body corporate approving the keeping of that animal on the lot, and whatever it might be. But certainly those first three are the big ones. And that normally, without doubt, there'll be something that'll go slightly wrong on the way through. Accountant might have access to the records. There might be a legal due diligence issue. The bank needs evaluation. It takes another week, whatever. So that's why it's sort of really, from the day you sign a contract to get it unconditional, probably 30 days is a realistic time frame. And then the next step is, these are the wrong slides. There you go. Body corporate approval. I'll come back to those other ones in a minute. So this is probably the biggest variable in the transaction. So each body corporate has a different personality, and that is driven by the committee. So as I mentioned before, some committees meet monthly, some don't meet at all. Depends, each one's different. So the starting point in terms of the approval process is to remember it's not like a job interview where there's 15 applicants, there's just you as a buyer. So the onus is on the body corporate to consent to the assignment unless it's reasonable for them to say no. So they can't unreasonably withhold consent is the phrase that we use in legal parlance. What that means is short of you having something horribly wrong in your background, they can't really refuse to consent to the assignment. But that's not to say that you walk in there and take that as granted. Like anything, first impressions count. So from my end, putting forward the best possible presentation when you're sending your material through to the committee is a wonderful way to start. So from a body corporate perspective, they're entitled to evidence and reference to your character, your competence, your qualifications, and your experience. Very broad, sweeping sort of phrases, but from my end, when you're putting together a resume and some references, it's worth addressing each of those criteria in doing that. And certainly from our end, we've sort of got some template references we send clients, and also sort of a template resume in terms of you can build into things that address those things. So from my end, the other thing to do is rather than put forward referees, so say ring Frank Higginson, here's his number, get a written reference. I've known Bill and Betty for 5 years. I've been their lawyer. I've acted for them on multiple transactions. I've always found them responsible and respectable people. They've paid their bills on time and I can recommend them to you. Perfect. So again, no one's going to put forward a reference that isn't obviously in their favour. So from my end, if you're going to have a resume, attach a couple of references to it in that format or along those lines. So use your accountant. Always pay their taxes on time. It's sometimes, having a law degree in some sense gives me a degree more credibility than someone that's unqualified, as much as that comes from getting a bit of paper, which is insanity. But anyway, if you can get those qualified type references, they're wonderful things to put on a resume. So do put your best foot forward when you're preparing that material. You know, a one-pager with, I've got an IT degree, I've got 2 kids and I want to buy management rights, here at Ring Joe Blogs for a reference, is probably not the way to present that. And particularly in circumstances where a committee, again, is a little bit conscious of what their obligations are around not unreasonably withholding consent, you don't want to give them any reason to think otherwise. So one of the other things that can happen, again, depends on your committee. Some of the meetings are cup of tea and a biscuit, g'day, how you going, 15 minutes later it's over. Some can be sort of 2-hour star chambers, depending on how the committee's experience has been with prior managers. There's a list of questions that you may be asked through that. So one of our things is to give you a list of the questions and how you may answer them, just to sort of educate you a little bit along the process. So, and we come at that as lawyers do on a worst case scenario basis. So we give you the most invasive questions you can possibly get asked and how you can then respond to those. The other thing to remember is that costs, the committee will probably get a lawyer involved, the body corporate manager will charge for it. Those costs are paid by the vendor. They're not your responsibility, but they will be your responsibility if and when you go to sell in 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it might be. So that process, the way it works is a body corporate's got 30 days from the receipt of all information reasonably necessary to make a decision on the assignment. So when you add that sort of 30-day due diligence period and 30 days for the committee to sort of deal with their issues, that's where you get to that 2-month, 60, 65-day window. It can happen quicker, and it does depend on how quickly the vendor can motivate the committee and how many of them there are and whether they're meeting and those sorts of things. So certainly from our end, acting for vendors, it's not usual to tell the body corporate that they've sold until such time as they're unconditional. So for you guys as buyers, if you've still got the right to terminate the contract based on finance, there's no point getting the body corporate all excited about consenting to an assignment when the contract's not actually there. So what you'll find is that more often than not, the vendors don't tell the body corporates until later in the piece. As much as we've got one at the moment where our client has a 15-year-old cat, we're acting for the buyer. The very first thing that's happened in that contract is the vendor's gone and got the body corporate's consent to the keeping of the cat. So they're well and truly live to the fact that the management rights have been sold. So again, a little bit of, there's always lots of different ways these things can change, but it is important to get that process right. Put your best foot forward, be professional about it, because those first impressions do count. So probably back 2 slides.
Stupid Windows 8.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah. Try now.
Cool. So how you earn an income, I think probably this has been covered a little bit, but I'll just run through it again for the hell of it. Your caretaking agreement is a contract for service, so you are not an employee of the body corporate. So it's not like my marketing manager Luke's over here hiding in the corner. So I can say to Luke, mate, I want you at the office at 8:15. I want you at the office till 5:30. You can have an hour for lunch between 1 and 2. Luke's an employee of mine, I prefer co-worker, but in a legal sense, I have the ability to dictate that to him. A body corporate arrangement or a management rights arrangement is not that same thing. What you're going to have is an agreement that says you must mow the lawns weekly, as an example. When you do that is up to you. It's not for the committee to say you've got to do it at 8:30 on a Monday morning. You can do it 4 o'clock on a Friday, you can do it midday on a Tuesday. As long as you do the job that's required by those agreements, you're okay. So that's back to that not being a concierge service. So what you find, again, it's when you get into the due diligence, there's a lot of paperwork that will come your way. There'll be agreements, there'll be bylaws, there'll be minutes of meetings and all those sorts of things. If there's one thing you should read, without any doubt at all, it's the caretaking agreement and specifically the caretaking duties. What the body corporate is going to require you to do. So, again, part of our due diligence is going through and making sure that they say what they should say. And a big one in a management rights sense is, and there's probably the phrase for this could be done a little bit better, but we talk about supervisory agreements and we talk about do agreements, which are ones where you do all the work. So a supervisory agreement would be you will arrange for the gardens to be done. So what that means is you'll go get quotes from gardeners to come and do X, Y and Z, the body corporate will pay for that and they'll direct you how they want it done. A do agreement is one where you are required to do the gardens, in which case it's on your account. Obviously you get paid a higher salary for it, and if you choose to outsource that to a gardener, that's completely your call, but that's at your expense. So they're the two big distinctions. And you do see there is no standard form caretaking agreement. They've all been drafted over time. Some might be 30 years old, some we're doing today. Some can recycle stuff that happened 15 years ago. So where we're getting to as an industry at the moment is more itemised schedule of duties, where it'll say daily a manager must do this, weekly this, monthly and so on. The old school style agreement will say maintain the lawns as required. So there's all different versions out there. From my end, I really don't mind one way or the other, although I tend to lean towards preferring, if we've got a choice, the itemised schedule duties, because what that does is help manage expectations on both sides. So from a body corporate and a manager's side of things, maintain the lawns as required. What does that actually mean? Does that mean mowing it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week? Not that 3 times a week might be a little bit extreme. In the middle of winter, do you need to do it weekly or can you do it bi-weekly? So when you break the duties down, to me it allows everyone to understand what they've got to do. And that's not to say a general set of duties is objectionable, but one of those things I think you need to do pretty early in the piece is go and understand what your body corporate's expectations are. So if it says maintain the lawns as required, what are their expectations around that? So agreeing that is a wonderful way to reduce disputes, because if you're going to have a dispute in management rights, almost without doubt it's going to relate to the performance of the duties. Where the body corporate expects one thing, you expect another. That is the genesis of 90% of the dispute work that we actually deal with. So managing expectations on that is a wonderful way to sort of solve issues. Letting commissions, and this is really where Sam comes in. So again, that letting agreement with your body corporate, you don't earn any money from the body corporate, but you earn money from a letting side of things from your Form 6s or your 20As with the individual owners. So again, Sam's job's to go through that, make sure that the income derived stacks up, that all of the Form 6s or the 20As are valid, are signed properly, are assignable and so on and so forth, and produce a report to you that says that's what it is. Other income streams in a permanent, private gardens, repairs and maintenance, postage and petties, and in holiday or short term, it's those same things plus all of the additional add-ons in terms of linen, cleaning, tour sales, etc., etc., etc. So all of that, from the letting commissions down, should be in your trust account or in the vendor's trust account. You will never get an accountant putting cash as a revenue line in these businesses. And that's why the banks tend to like them, because it goes into trust, it comes out of trust, it's 100% verifiable. And that's one of the difference between this and a news agency or the fish and chip shop or whatever it might be, which is cash. This is all trust. And the only part that's not trust is the caretaking agreement, and that's absolutely verifiable in the context of what the agreement says the body corporate must pay you. So there's no ifs, buts or maybes. It's there or it's not. So the legal due diligence, sort of briefly covered that before. The management rights agreements, all variations to it. And what you'll find is the agreements won't be physically in your name. The way they work is sort of old school title. So you might have an agreement entered into with Frank that was then signed to Christine, was then assigned to Rusty, and then Rusty selling to you. So part of what we need to do from a due diligence perspective is follow that through, make sure that all of the consents have been done along the way, that the documentation's there and so on, so that when you step into the shoes of the manager, it's absolutely 100% legal and absolutely 100% yours. So the CMS, we talk about the entitlements, individual bylaws that you need to be aware of. And it's interesting, bylaws, just because they're in a CMS doesn't mean they're lawful. So you quite often you find bodies corporate will include things in bylaws because they want to sort of not necessarily bully people, but sort of be able to stand over people if needed. If there's any of those particular bylaws in there, we'll draw your attention to it. And the big one at the moment is pets. There's a legislative paper out for review around where people stand with pets at the moment. But as it sits right now, body corporate can't say no to a pet. So if there's a bylaw that says no pets are allowed in this building, that's completely unlawful. So one of those things is we'll point that out to you so you know along the way through. But again, that's an issue for the body corporate, not for you guys to enforce. So to the extent that someone did have a pet in their lot that you became aware of, what your job is to report it to the committee, and the committee's job then to action. It's not for you to go and grab the animal by the scruff of the neck and call the RSPCA. Title of the property, we run through the unit, minutes and records. Intellectual property is becoming a bigger one. That's in the context of Facebook, Twitter, TripAdvisor, Google+, all those sorts of things. Trademarks, domain names, phone numbers. In a permanent context, it's not anywhere near as important, but in a short-term context, it's becoming increasingly critical. So checking what's out there and making sure that comes across. Tell you about the other statutory provisions that apply to you in a management rights context. And really, the ACL there is Australian consumer law. So the way that works, people might have seen sort of the unfair contracts legislation that popped up a couple of years ago, where banks suddenly just can't pin you with a $50 overcharge fee because they feel like it. The Australian consumer law applies to you as well, where you won't engage in misleading, deceptive conduct, you'll act in your client's best interests and so on. And again, the big one for me is the resolution of issues. It's all well and good to pick problems in things, and believe me, it's pretty rare to go through a business and not find something that's sort of a little bit different, because they're all different. What I think we're pretty good at is resolving issues. Some things should be made a big deal of and some shouldn't be. But we guide you through that decision-making process because we've seen it 1,000 times. Body corporate approval dealt with. Licensing, Dennis has no doubt dealt with this. So you were all the recipients of the Property Occupations Act, which was one of the last things the LNP did before they were shunted from office. So you don't need to reside on site anymore as a condition of a resident letting agent's licence. But what you need to have is an office on site. So that's not to say that your management rights agreements don't need you to reside on site, because they're effectively two separate things. What the POA deals with is just licensing. So if your management rights agreements say that you must still reside in the lot in the scheme, then that's what you must do. So again, from our end, it's one of those things that we need to look at from a due diligence perspective. The other thing is that it is extremely uncommon for you to have your licence before settlement. That's just fair trading, one of the last bastions of red tape. They move relatively slowly. So from my end, what you're going to have is an audit of your trust account after settlement. Your auditor has a statutory obligation to report breaches of the trust account to fair trading. I'm yet to see an auditor report someone for not having a licence on the day they settled. And fair trading knows that's the case as well. But if you haven't got a licence within 3 or 4 months, that absolutely would be an issue. So from my end, what I say to clients is go do your course. And from my end, if you're interested in this industry, do the course now, even before you found a complex, because you're obviously interested enough to be here to learn about management rights today. I have lots of interesting conversation with clients in the midst of their courses where they're dealing with people that are also looking at businesses, and you start to learn where other people are coming from and potentially from their mistakes. Some people will be doing the course and they're settling next week. From my end, if you're actually interested in this industry, do the course now. So if you've done the course, once you've found your complex, lodge your application then, and then you're in the process, you have a number, and it's just then a matter of following through before settlement and gently with fair trading, and usually it'll come through pretty quickly. Rusty's spoken about salesperson option with RAS, the other one, and Dennis certainly offers it as a full licence. From my end, again, you've shown enough inclination to be here to learn about management rights. What you're getting into, aside from being a people management industry, is actually a property management industry. So if you're going to educate yourself about what you're about to invest in, doing your full licence for me is a simple add-on in terms of at least the course, so that you understand more about what these outside agents and all that sort of thing are going to be coming at you on. You don't need to go and get your full licence. Do the course though. I think it's nuts actually if you don't. Just makes a lot of sense. So doing the job. So again, I mentioned before, if we're going to have a dispute around in management rights, it's going to relate to performance of caretaking duties. And I think this has been belted out of the industry. It's not a job where you'd play golf 3 days a week. You know, if there's an overriding theme, I think, in today's business community, and supplies as much to us as it does to anyone else, is value for money. It's not just a fee, here it is. And what you'll find when you engage us is you will see what we do on the way through, because we copy you in on every single bit of correspondence we send. And you guys need to be doing the same thing. So when you're in there, in a management rights business, show that you've got to do the job and you've got to be seen to be doing the job. So from my end, what that means is effectively, talking about doing the lawns before, wonderful time to do them is 8 o'clock on a Monday morning when everyone's driving off to work. They see you working when they're driving off. Do the same thing. Be out there mucking around in the gardens at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because they see you working when they come home. They don't know what you've done for the rest of the day, but it's that visibility that makes a difference. The other thing for me is that the red flag. So I said, if there's no degree needed for management rights. If there is, it's probably in human psychology, because that's what you're going to be dealing with. It's not a relationship where you can just walk away from people that are involved in it. So if you don't like me or Sam or Raz or anyone, you don't ever need to see us again. Very simple. There's a big business community out there, probably 4 or 5 people that do each component of it properly. You can find someone that you relate to. In a management rights sense, you can't do that, because all of these people are lot owners. You're also a lot owner. You've got a contract with their body corporate, and you're going to see them every day or every other day. So being able to engage with people and understand them and relate to them is a very, very important part of this industry. I say to people, if you're the sort of person that likes drawing a line in the sand and picking fights for the sake of it, this is not the industry for you, because the moment you pick one of those fights, that person then puts their hand up to go on the committee and they can cause you enormous grief. If you get on with people and can roll with the punches, which comes with running the business, then this may well be the industry for you. Because once you get past that people management side of things, they are very, very hard businesses to get wrong. And believe me, I've seen some appalling instances of people. I mean, we've got one at the moment, well, 2 at the moment actually, really interesting one, where examples of, I suppose, that line in the sand approach, where a client, and this has only come to us after the event, has these wonderful little topiary trees, running round. They've got a little bit untidy. So those topiary things, you've just got to trim them so they stay in their balls or their triangles or whatever it is. Been let go a little bit long. We're having a little bit of a dispute with the chairperson. So the chairperson said, bloody hell, would you go and trim those trees? Cool. Our client's gone out and got the hedge trimmer and just gone bang, bang. Just, which is now the fight. It's just, that conversation about lines in the sand, picking fights you don't need to, there was no need to do that, but we've done it, and now we look like absolute idiots when the committee circulates that to owners. So why would you do that? Another one, we've got, again, these are all the performance issues that you can deal with. If you do your job properly, these aren't going to be an issue. So again, client gets chipped about not mowing the lawns, says it's been raining, yeah, sure, but the grass is that high, so it hasn't been raining for 6 weeks. So again, lawn gets mowed, and the client then goes and runs over all the mondo grasses that are on the pavers in the pool as well. So the mondos that are that big and don't grow are now that big. So that's another fight that we picked that we didn't need to. So that's sort of people management. And again, all of that could have been dealt with by understanding where the red flags were coming from, engaging with the committee earlier in the process, understanding what our job was, and actually just doing it. It's really not that hard. And that comes back to, again, not trying to skim on costs. That's where the value is. The body corporates are paying salaries. What you'll find is that in a body corporate budget sense, every year the budget goes out to owners with the AGM. Your caretaking salary is going to be the single biggest line item in that budget. Without any doubt. It's going to be somewhere between 1/3 and 1/4 of what the body corporate's overall spend for the year is going to be. So it's natural for people to look at it. So a body corporate's not a creature that has sort of discretionary spending. It doesn't go to JB Hi-Fi and buy televisions, doesn't go on holidays. It's got a very set number of things it can spend its money on, and it absolutely has to have someone there to do the caretaking. Like particularly the bigger schemes, that's where management rights has come from. It's not for the committee to run around and do it from a volunteer perspective. It's not for the body corporate managers. It needs someone on site. So there's an essential need for what is being done, and it comes back to you guys to communicate that value on an ongoing basis when you're dealing with these body corporates. So it's not again, that's difficult in industry, but when you descend to the stage of trimming the trees like that, to me, that's probably 8 months after when the issue first arose. That's a byproduct of lots of chipping over a period of time, which comes back to our client's ability to manage the people and engage with the committee he's dealing with. And don't get me wrong, some of the committees are going to be unreasonable, they're going to be unrational. Their sole qualification to get into a committee position is to put their hand up at a general meeting. But that's one of the things that comes with the industry. So being able to engage with those people and deal with them is going to be a really important part of what you're buying into. And if you can do that, my guarantee to you is that's 99% of the problems are solved. It really is. So common misconceptions. So some of the things that hopefully you won't hear out there, but if you do, you know will be wrong. So while you have an agreement with your body corporate, you absolutely should have an exclusive right to provide letting services from on-site. That doesn't mean that the LJ Hookers and the Ray Whites and the professionals can't come door knocking your owners seeking managements. They absolutely can. So the way those letting appointments work is they can all be terminated on between probably 30 days notice. So while a caretaking agreement, a letting agreement are going to be for a finite term, can only be terminated through cause if you do something horribly wrong, letting appointments and managements can come and go. So what you need to do is make sure you market yourself to your owners, you stay in touch with your owners, you engage with your owners that use you as their letting agent. In that sense, you're no different to what I am here today, in effect sort of touting or pitching for business, making you want to engage with me, make it easy for you to ring me if you've got an issue, and that's where keeping management appointments comes from, those sort of things. So owners aren't obliged to use you. You absolutely have a competitive advantage being on site, but that doesn't mean they have to. And absolutely one of the things you'll see on all the listing sheets usually from the brokers is there will be units in the complex, number of units in the letting pool, outside rentals. Outside rentals are those ones that people are choosing to use an outside agent for whatever reason. For me, some of those outside agents could be because they own a unit and their brother is the owner of Ray White. If that's the case, you're probably not going to pick that one back up. Others could be because at some stage they had a falling out with the resident manager 2 vendors ago, and their chances to pick those back up. And obviously the more of those you see, to me it's potentially reflective of the relationship that owner has with their owners. If you had a letting pool of 20 in the pool and 25 outside, what's that say? So the vendor's not getting on with people properly, or they're not marketing themselves properly, and there's potential upside in that. You cannot use your RLA, if you've got a resident letting licence, for anything other than renting units in the complex for which you hold the body corporate approval. You can't rent houses down the road. You can't sell real estate. It's limited to that alone. So if you want to do those things, you go get your sales certificate and lob under someone's full licence like Raz, or you go get your full licence, in which case, from a real estate perspective, you can do anything in Queensland. Sale, rent, lease, sell, happy days. Management rights, the management rights agreements themselves have a finite term. So again, we're back to standard module, which is a maximum of 10, accommodation module, which is a maximum of 25. A body corporate's not automatically obliged to give you more term when term runs down. So one of the things you need to do, if you're in a standard module building, you need to look at topping your agreement up every 2 to 3 years. Probably 2 years is what we say to clients. If you're in an accommodation module building, probably every 5. And from my end, the time to top up an agreement is when you're going to get away with a yes. The longer the term you've got, the more secure you are. So one of the things we're building in our system now for clients is a reminder for them to do that. Some people, we had one the other day where a client had let a standard module agreement run down to 6 months. Bought it 9.5 years ago. Got a new agreement when they bought, let it run all the way down. Rang me, Frank, what should I do? I said, you should get a new agreement. And we did, and we got away with it in happy days. But if for whatever reason he'd alienated his body corporate, that would not have left us in a strong bargaining position. So the more term you've got, the better off you are. And it's one of those things that you need to continually monitor, stay on top of, and that happens by ordinary resolution at general meeting. So simply more owners voting in favour than against. So it's not half of the owners, it's half of those voting. Voting in a body corporate context is not compulsory. So you could have a scheme of 100 units. If it was 3 in favour and 2 against, that's passed on an ordinary resolution basis. So again, back to that people management side of things, engaging with your owners, engaging with your committee, getting on with people, that becomes a no-brainer. If you're going to pick fights, take people on, alienate your committee, that's where people start to have difficulty, as much as it's pretty rare regardless. A management rights agreement is a contract. It cannot be changed unless both parties agree. So it's no different to me signing a contract to buy your house for $400,000. I can't turn around 6 weeks after the event, so I'm actually going to make that $350 now. You sometimes get bodies, corporates, that, oh, we're going to reduce your remuneration, we're going to increase your duties. No, you can't. It's a deal. It can only be changed if both parties agree to it. Full stop, end of story. Modules, while the standard accommodation have maximum of 10 years, maximum of 25, just because they're in either of those modules does not mean that's the term remaining under the agreement. So you can have accommodation module agreements that go for 15 years. It just depends on what the parties have actually seen. So from our end, again, you can change from standard to accommodation. If you do, you can then enter into a new agreement for up to 25 years. What we're doing one with a client at the moment where they're going to do that, they're not seeking 25, they're seeking 15, because from their end that's better than 10. So again, part of due diligence is confirming how long there is to run, because that becomes a very important factor from a finance perspective, and then assessing for you, again, one of the other things we do in our report is we sort of recommend to you when you might consider next varying the agreement. That could be a year, that could be 2 years, it could be 3 years, subject to whatever the actual circumstances are. And this last one is largely gone, but I'll explain what a secret commission or a kickback is. What you'll have with each of your letting owners is your letting appointment. That letting appointment probably allows you to charge an hourly rate for provision of services other than management, or a percentage of a capital replacement. So for example, you've got a furnished unit in your rental pool, the fridge blows up. That's not ordinarily part of what you're paid your percentage for, so you're absolutely entitled to charge your owner to go and procure a replacement fridge. So you've got to go to Harvey Norman or the Good Guys or whatever, you've got to arrange for the old one to go, a new one to arrive, arrange the entry and exit notices to the tenants to allow it to happen, and so on and so forth. And for that you should be paid. There's no argument about that. The old school way of doing it would be to say to the owner, I'll arrange the fridge, go and get an invoice for $1,000 from the Good Guys, which you send through to the owner, but they actually only charge you $900 and you pocket the $100 difference when the owner pays the $1,000. That's completely unlawful. The right way to do it is to say to the owner in your letting appointment, which is what the bulk of them do, is we'll charge you a fee of 10% of the replacement of any capital items. So on that same basis, you go and get a fridge for $900, you invoice the owner for the $90 and you're done. Completely legal. The other one, and again, probably where the RAS model came from in essence, was real estate agents coming in and saying to you, well, if you give any leads on listings in here that we sell, I'll sling you $1,000. That's completely unlawful as well. That's actually criminal. So the relationship you have with each of your owners under your letting appointments is a fiduciary one. That means you must act in that owner's best interest. It's no different to the relationship I have with you when you engage us as your lawyer. I've got to put your interest before mine. If I make any money off you from referrals or whatever, I've got to tell you. And if I don't, I get struck off, so that cost me my professional ticket. As an example would be, one of the banks years ago came to us and said, here you go, we'll put you on a trail if you refer us clients who finance management rights that, through us. We just said, no, not going to do that. If we did, we'd have to disclose it to each of you guys if and when we referred you to it, and to me that actually smells to high heaven. So again, for me, I think the simplest way to look at secret commissions or kickbacks is if you didn't tell the owner, why not? And if you can't answer that honestly, that actually speaks for itself in my mind. So disclosure cures 90% of the evil, but don't get caught taking those. And again, Sam will go through the records. If there are any there, he will tell you, and that's not the stuff that you'll be purchasing. So again, it remains relatively transparent like that, but sometimes people still take. It absolutely still goes on, and for me, it's stuff that can lead to termination of your management rights agreements, and that's not the stuff you want to have hanging over your head, believe me. So yeah, summary, I suppose it's really surround yourself with industry experts, and again, if you don't like me, there's a couple of other lawyers that do it relatively well, maybe not as well, but maybe that's a little bit subjective. Use someone that knows what they're doing, and the simple question is, how many have you got on at the moment? Like as we sit right now, we've probably got 30 or 40 individual management rights transactions buying and selling. If they say we've got 2, they're not in the game. You know, so there's a lot of stuff that goes on. Educate yourself. You're here, it's a bloody good start. I've got a guide for people buying management rights, whichever I can grab on the way out. Do that full licence course, do your licence course, scout around our website, become a member of ARAMA and scout around theirs. The more reading you can do at this stage, the better off you're going to be. There's no shortcut to it. I've probably got all your emails, but like I said, I punch out a newsletter once a fortnight on sort of one's body corporate and one's management rights. So all our management rights clients get the body corporate one. So the one that's coming out tomorrow in a body corporate sense is the roles of each of the individual committee members and what they can and can't do, which is sort of relatively interesting. And they all come off the back of whatever the issue of the month is that's come across our desk. So last month in management rights was separating your management lot from your management rights business and how you do that, the things to take into account and whether it's good, bad or indifferent. So I write them. I'd like to think they're all very topical. They're free. Hop online. So other than that, that's it for me. Thank you all.